The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome in. It's the Coach Bill Clark Show, presented by Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper. Pat Smith along with Molly Robinson and Coach Bill Clark. Coach, how was the Masters viewing? Did you enjoy it like Molly did, winning the green jacket on three-man front?
I know. I was bragging on Molly coming in today. You know, there's our resident golf Masters expert.
She is an expert.
She told me she was. So
She's self-proclaimed.
she did. Well, she won the green jacket.
She did win the green jacket.
So we
She
didn't
most
need to
certainly
brag
did.
on her.
Yeah.
And her granddad went 47 years in a row.
That's amazing.
If you
That's
didn't know
pretty
that,
cool.
that's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
No, it was great. Sat there and just watched it and enjoyed it, and had some great moments at the end with everybody, and turned out great.
We are going to talk a little bit later in the show about the mental aspects of golf and football, because there was a lot of mental stuff going on that final round in Augusta. But we got to start with the huge story. It started percolating last Thursday. It came to a head on Saturday. Nico, the quarterback for Tennessee, his family, they decide they want more money. They decide they're leaving. They officially enter the transfer portal on Wednesday, a no contact tag, which typically means they might be already heading somewhere. That's typically what that means. But take us there. Take us through the mindset of Josh Heupel getting the news that your starting quarterback did not show up to practice on Friday.
Gosh, we could go, we're going to go a lot of places here. One, when your quarterback is not the guy for whatever reason. Sometimes you just have to figure that out. But when you hear that he was thinking about opting out of a playoff game, I mean, okay, rumors, I think that's probably pretty true. That's the stuff when you start. I mean, immediately I would have been starting to look. Now, you've invested, you've trained, you put money, you put time, but then you started going, something's up here. That's a worry, one. Two, now we're seeing what happens when you get bad advice, in my opinion. Now, does not mean he can't turn on the other side of that if it's just a financial piece. In this world and winning being so important and what it is, he may make out, but bad advice, the way it was handled, all the above, and this is what you're hearing where you got agents and dads and I, of course, dealt with a lot of the dads and the handlers. Not as many of the agents. Obviously, that was just starting to come through, but just a tough situation.
So let me go back into the mindset of Josh Heupel. So you've got your starting quarterback who was at the OC's, his position coach, his house, supposedly playing with the kids, having dinner, just everything was hunky-dory. And then the next morning, you're supposed to have a team meeting. Then you're supposed to have a walkthrough for the spring game the next day. And he's a no-show. You try to communicate with Nico, nothing, zero. As a head coach, would you have handled it any differently?
Yeah, I think the only thing is where's the smoke and fire? The playoff deal would have really got me. I would have been starting to prepare then. Now, you've got to – this is a talent. This is a guy you invested in, and maybe he showed you enough. You don't see any of that in the offseason because it's all going behind the scenes. If you ever thought how screwed up this thing is now, okay, guys, here it is. And this is what, we could talk a whole show on leadership, lack of leadership when there was a chance to put the guardrails up. And, and this is where, and I'm gonna call out some ADs here. It's used to, we had guys that would lead, and I'm not talking about Tennessee's AD. I'm just talking about the collective group who just got along and they didn't speak up to protect the sport. We've got coaches that didn't speak. I know I'm getting off from beating a dead horse because we're where we are, but maybe this wakes some people up to say we've got to do some things to fix this. I do like the idea that there's people saying, no, we're just not in this because of how it was handled, because this is the leader of your team. So there's so many facets to it.
Well, some people are laughing at Tennessee because they say, well, that's what you get. You offered $8 million to an unproven talent out of high school.
Yeah.
You're talking about an immature young person who all of a sudden he's a California kid and you're going to drop him in East Tennessee to play in the toughest football conference in college football. And you pay him $2 million to sit on the sidelines for a year.
Yep.
Then he comes back and then they threaten to not even play anymore, go into the college football playoff. Like you said, they should have seen the immaturity and the lack of leadership, as you pointed out, Coach. where they got to this point.
Yeah, and I want to say this. I don't blame the players for the whole scenario. It was created by lack of leadership, and now they're just going with a hand that's dealt them. They're just this is just what it is. Hey, let's go make as much money as we can. This is what is said. Now, of course, every time they turn around, somebody's telling them that in the media or whoever, and comparing players and coaches and some of that, which we can talk about. But I don't blame them. I do blame this situation was handled terribly. Even if you just get through the spring, to me, all right, get through the game, and if you want to look at the portal and those, there's a way to handle everything. But he's, the people he's listening to and guiding him, help create this. But the whole scenario is just bad.
So I want to go back to something you said a moment ago, December. So there was this really quiet rumor out there that they weren't happy in December. And they had threatened potentially not going to play in the college football playoff game against Ohio State. If you would have been in that situation as the head coach of a football program and the quarterback had just hinted that might be a possibility, what would have been your reaction? How would you have handled it?
1,000,000%. We're getting somebody else. Now,
do you communicate that with the player? Or with his team? Or do you say, okay, you take that information, you go to the quarterback, offensive coordinator, and you say, all right, guys, here's the plan.
That's it.
Okay.
Well, it's like we always said, if we've mistreated somebody, that's on us. But when we feel like somebody is
where you've invested the time and money and effort,
and it's been done correctly, and then you're going to do something crazy like that, we're not going to hurt ourselves. We're going to go out and protect ourselves. And then the second we get – now, you talk about straight business. We're going to protect ourselves, and the moment we can cut him loose, we cut him loose. That's because what you've seen. And
so that first inkling that there's an issue or a demand, so to speak, Bill Clark's making plans at that moment.
100%. Because that's just, that position is too important. Once again, we have created this mindset out there that it's just go get mine at all cost. I think that's I was paid to win. Were you paid to win at all cost? No, not to me. But once again, it's not the question of getting the money. I think if it just was handled correctly, mine is more the story of that you were trying to walk out in the playoffs, and of course we heard that happen at Alabama with some players.
Absolutely,
with Nick Saban. So anyway, there's been people shock you all the time and surprise you, but shame on them now, shame on me. Okay, shame on you for not being ready for this after he proved who he was in the playoffs. To me.
So we don't know how this is going to end up because as we are taping this program right now, Coach, Nico has not come out of the portal to another school. We were kind of kicking the tires a little bit on three-man front. What if Tennessee can't find themselves another quarterback in the portal? Nico can't get the money that he's looking to get. They're talking about the market is crashing for him. Is there a scenario that you would see a head football coach welcome back his starting quarterback, Nico, back into the program, maybe at a discounted rate financially, but because of the leadership or lack of, is that something that you just do not want in your program moving forward, or do you accept him back?
I say you don't want him in your program, but we've seen guys do different things. We've seen guys say, "Hey, bygones be." And
I'm not asking you from like a Josh Heupel. I'm saying Bill Clark.
Absolutely,
Bill Clark.
Absolutely. No, I'm hard-headed.
I knew the answer
I'm
to that.
kind of hard-headed.
I was wanting you to get fired up and knock the mic over and say, "What are you talking about?"
I could. But those are the things that it's sad. It's sad that we get to these points. Once again, though, the leadership, and I was in that group that should have said more, spoke out more. NCAA athletic directors, head coaches that didn't put up the parameters when they had the opportunity, and now here we are. Players are doing what players do, and they have an opportunity to do. But then there's just when you don't handle it right, like the playoffs, or when you could wait 2 days, and get through practice, maybe even. I don't know. There's a way to handle everything. But you got to look at yourself when you had a chance to say, this is who this guy is. Because of who he listens to, whatever. That's what it is. And you got to get yourself out of that situation.
And we cannot get into the mind of Nick, the father of Nico, in regards to what their mindset is. There was an interview they conducted with Front Office Sports today in which they basically said, we haven't given bad advice at all. We're pretty happy with where we are right now, which was kind of bizarre. But when you look at a situation like that, whether it's an agent or whether it's a father, and then you start throwing out demands like that, you got to give major kudos to Tennessee and to Josh Heupel for drawing a line in this game.
I'm so proud of them just to say enough's enough, And I think that's where we've got to do. It's like, okay, if this is every day is open season, and that's really where we are now. Every single day. Now, you say, well, they only have these 2 windows, but if they're working on it every day, if they're taking calls every day, if they're tampering every day, then it is every day is open season. Mentally, which I've talked about so many times with their heads, they get their heads screwed up with their teammates and they're talking about it and it's rumor and it's innuendo and all those things. And somewhere in there, you got to say, we've got standards. We've got the way we conduct ourselves. And then you're just trying to find those guys that just, that want to be there.
Yeah. And that kind of plays off my next question because just from a football standpoint, and I know you don't watch every single Tennessee game. I know you watch them 30,000-foot view. But as you watch him as a quarterback and knowing the amount of money that Tennessee has dedicated for his services, the lack of leadership, I don't hear anybody saying that Nico was getting up and giving a speech like Tim Tebow did. You saw him run out of bounds instead of throwing the ball in the end zone in the Arkansas game. Just a boneheaded play as a quarterback. Just talk about his football is, the IQ of him on the football field and his abilities. Was he worth even half of what they were paying him?
Yeah, I think the projection was what they saw. They saw the height, they saw the arm, they saw the speed, and it wasn't translating to what they'd put in him. Not bad, but not unbelievable. And that's when you say, okay, the value proposition of, we're just talking like NFL. You look great, but are you great? Especially with the money Tennessee's got and the money they can put in. And, and sometimes it's like, okay, this is what we got, but we're looking for the next guy, especially if there's a questionable character issue, which the playoffs, to me, there's no way you can paint that as anything but wrong.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This is the Bill Clark Show, presented by Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper. Talking about the Nico situation with Coach Clark, I was joking with him before we came on air that Coach got out of it just in time before you had to really – I know you had to deal with plenty of drama back in your day, whether it was at UAB, Jacksonville State, or even at Prattville.
Yeah.
But I don't think you could ever have – what would your dad say today?
And that's what's funny. So you would think, okay, this guy coached in the 60s and 70s and coached football and basketball. He was a player's coach to a degree. I remember him telling me early on, you can't run off all the good players.
That's good philosophy.
It was a great philosophy, and it was. I had a player I had to remove early on at Prattville, and it was really academics. And I remember him telling it because he was assistant for me, my last stop at Prattville. And one of my coaches said he always told this story about Dad said, his job when it gets to him at that point is to have to run this kid off. Our job was to have saved him as assistant coaches. That was the mindset that it was about the kids. It was about the kid. I think when we've turned it into so much business. That's the sad deal. And when the pro level has got better constraints, and I hate to say that word because
that's crazy,
but then the college level, when they do it right, when they at least protect them during the season and all those things for the good of the game, and we can't do that, it's pitiful.
One thing our listeners and viewers can do, and that's go to Smart Bank, because you want to talk about being smart. Those folks know what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm finding more and more people as they get in with our folks at Smart Bank and see just the different avenues they have, from private banking to car dealerships or all the above. They have the big and the small, but they can do it all, but they've got the small town banking feeling of knowing their customers. So check our guys out at Smart Bank.
All right, so let's talk about the future of Nico and what's next. So we're assuming that he's not going back to Tennessee, or they don't want him back. So think about the pressure. Let's go back and say that the family got what they wanted. Mm-hmm. Let's say Tennessee, okay, we'll give you the $4 million. The kind of pressure that would have been on that young man to perform. I mean, it's a high degree of anxiety to begin with, being a quarterback in the Southeastern Conference at a program like Tennessee. But all of a sudden, you've got $4 million in your bank account. The one little interception, a fumble, a running out of bounds like he did at Arkansas as opposed to throwing the ball in the end zone, those type things. How in the world would he have been able to survive in Knox County?
Yeah, and let me tell you something. Those NFL guys, go to an NFL like, Zach Woodfin, who played and coached for me, is at the Titans. I mean, you're talking about security. Try and go into one of these and see these NFL guys. And I'm not saying you couldn't see them somewhere, but they are shielded and protected, and that's the NFL. College guys are different. They're on campus. They're a different age bracket.
Right.
I mean, so I think it would have been awfully tough, and I think that's where what is enough? $2 million is not enough to with some place that
for a 19-year-old.
Right. I mean, and granted, we want fair market value, but $2 million is not enough. I mean, when did we get to that point? And that's where you've got the people who saying somebody in there is getting a 20% cut or whatever, and they're just keeping on. They're just pushing and don't care about any of that except getting theirs.
All right, he ends up anywhere. We heard today that the market's crashing for him, that he might be fortunate to get $1 million wherever he comes out of the transfer portal. Now you're talking about a whole nother area of pressure on this young man, because now all of a sudden he was a better, in my opinion, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in my opinion, he was above average SEC quarterback this last year.
100%.
So now he's going somewhere, and he's getting paid less than what he did in the SEC. He's not going to be in the best conference in college football. What kind of pressure is going to be on his shoulders now? Because it's almost like he's got to reproclaim himself on what he could potentially do in the future.
I could take this scenario, though, back to so many times with a parent, a handler who screwed kids up, and, you would just see it coming. It's like the dad who keeps the kid and he's moving him school to school, or he's shopping him, or he's calling. And we've seen it at a different level. This is just being played out on a lot bigger scale. But I'm saying it would be so sad because we're like, that dad's screwing that kid up so bad. There's this kid just there who, that's his dad. That's an uncle or whoever that is he trusts. And you would just hope, man, I hope this kid can get himself away from that. And I feel like there's got to be a lot to this situation where he's getting bad advice, but he's still taking it. He's still following, and he's old enough now to step out and do what he should be doing. But I've seen it so many times in just other scenarios.
In regards to in your career, and you mentioned something that happened at Prattville High School, when you get to the level of UAB, being big time college football, did you have to deal? I'm not talking about, obviously not the money or what's going on now, but just the overzealous parent at times, or the overzealous guardian, or whoever it was supposedly representing the best interests of their loved one that was on your football team.
Great question. So the things that we did for me, and having been a high school coach, I always did not want to lose the parent. And I think one of the things that set us apart, because I had somebody ask this on Twitter about what did you do between 2015 and 2016, and that's something we could maybe get to about, how we recruited and practiced every other day and some things like that. But we're going around the room, and I usually knew the answers to the questions before I asked them. Not every detail, like, what did Johnny run the 40 in today or whatever that was. But, and of course it was a lot higher level. But I'm talking to each coach. Where is the communication where the player knows? And we talked a lot about there should not be any gray area on what you do in the weight room, your speed, your pro agility, your academics. We're expecting you to have that. And then we had coaches making calls proactively twice a year to say, here's what's going on with Johnny, and whether that was fun or not for that coach, we did it, because it was. We kept those parents at least to say, you do not say we didn't tell you. And he's also, the player's going to be able to tell you also, but if you want to, we can get here and get this tape out.
Tape don't lie, right?
And that's happened a few times.
Yeah.
But communication. But, I was going back to our junior college players. That was one of the things. We got their parents back involved and invite them on these visits. So here's this kid. He's been off to junior college. Mm-hmm. He's 20 years old. He's, had to go live this tough lifestyle and almost like a mercenary. And I remember the parents say, Coach, thank you for getting us involved again, because we hadn't been involved since he left.
Yeah.
And I wanted them back in it. So that's a little bit different than the overzealous parent. And you quickly say, okay, now, just so you understand, this is college football. I mean, I didn't deal with that in high school because we treated them all right. We took care of them. We loved them. We come in, and we did. We always had playing time issues. But hopefully you've communicated it so much, everybody knows, and especially the player knows.
On the Bill Clark Show, we're blessed to have some great sponsors, and either the pollen has stopped falling or you've actually taken your Tahoe to the car wash.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to protest on that. I do wash the Tahoe. I will have a great car wash here in Birmingham that I use, and they detail it every week. But the guys at Donahue, we were talking about them twice a week because they sponsored Three Men Front before, and they also sponsored us. But those guys are just, you got all the great Chevy deals and the Tahoes. I think they got a great product, but you got great people. And I think they're going to find you a great price, and they're always having promotions. So I really appreciate the guys at Donahue.
All right, let's talk about some things that happened over the weekend in Augusta, because it was, whether you were able to watch it or not, you could feel the tension between Rory and Bryson stepping on the first tee box. So much was written about what had happened in the past. Rory had gone, nearly 8 years, 9 years without, winning a major?
Yeah.
10.
That's right.
Something like that. I think the sixth longest in history. You could tell the tension, and then he double bogeys. Then all of a sudden, here we go. Yeah. And then the way that he was able to turn that around the next 9 holes. Just talk about that mental aspect. And as you're watching it, and as a coach, like, what's going through your mind of how he can get his mind right to try to get the round back together, because it looked like it was going south?
Yeah, 2 things. I want to talk about that, and then I want to talk about the relief.
Okay.
All right. So the mindset to have to do it really by yourself. You got your caddy, but that's a individual. The mental toughness he had to turn that around. Now, what I thought was funny was this deal where Bryson says he doesn't speak to him the whole round.
Do you think that was an intimidation thing, or just the fact that he was so locked in on his own zone that he wasn't worried about what Bryson was doing?
I think it was that, but I think when you go back and they said, well, what happened when you won? When you beat him right there at the end on the last one, and Rory maybe blew it or whatever, and he said something to the effect, well, you helped me. It was almost like a smart comment, and I was like, okay, is this focus, or is this like, I'm not talking to this guy? I mean, I'm not letting him get in my head, especially if you said something to me at the end that's kind of like, you stuck it in, So there's that part of it, of just what was the mental toughness that it takes just to be in that. That's like we talk about a field goal kicker.
Yeah.
You're out there really by yourself with all eyes on you, and just imagine that over and over. Of course, there's so much muscle memory and so much practice and all those things, but the afterwards was something I could really think of, is when you finally win the championship, being close, and I remember we had been close at Prattville, and I remember 2006 we were 14-0 and played really well. We're playing Hoover in the championship, Russian. They've got a really good team, and been there so many times, and one of my players, because this had really become the mentality, and he said. They said, what is it? You're 14-0 if you finish second. He said, if we finish second, we might as well not even make the playoffs. He said, because it's all or none for us now. And that was what it took. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about relief, you can't, it's hard to describe. And that's what you saw in him. You're like, what is it? He's won all these matches. You talk about pressure. And you heard what he said. He said, I don't know what they'll talk about now. So he's been watching it. He's been hearing it. He's been feeling it. Yeah. So that just, when that drains out of you, and you're just like, thank God. And and that's kind of where after that you're like, because you're expected to win. So then it was just relief.
Well, it was amazing to me just watching it. It was great television, the drama from, he gets on the first tee box and go, here we go. Yeah. I mean, he's going to self-destruct.
Right.
Then he puts it back together, and then it goes, you know what? This is about to be a blowout.
Right.
Like, I'm about to go wash the car or do something this afternoon instead of watching this. Then all of a sudden, boom, he puts it in the creek.
Yeah.
And then there's a window, and then all of a sudden Justin Rose, 2 holes ahead of him, is, he's back in contention. So to me, just the roller coaster ride of 1 through 18, and then you go to the playoff, and be able to get it done. And it's like you said, watching him fall to his knees and just the exhaustion of just the frustration just finally pouring out of Rory, that was pretty special.
I think something interesting too, the guys that let it all hang out, who make these crazy great shots and can really be unbelievable, but then they're going to do something like that. And he's that, to me, seems like that kind of guy. Of course, he goes sees Nicholas, and maybe there's some places I can lay up or whatever that is, but he's not built that way. It's the, he's the kind that goes for the fourth downs in his own territory and looks like an idiot sometimes probably, but then he makes these crazy shots and so just different mindsets of how they play, and to see him when he really he had it won. But maybe just because he's just that go for it guy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Talking about big sporting events, and one of our great sponsors, Global Canine Protection Group, Coach, they're very involved in a lot of the not only top sporting events, but political events and other big events throughout our country.
Yeah, I'd about to say if you're at a big time event, probably the Masters. I don't know that per se, but they're at those kind of events. But just it's so cool because they got all the dogs that you see the German Shepherd, and then you got the soft-eared dogs that don't scare people, but they can smell guns, they can smell bombs. Just very cool, and we're seeing them all across our state, airports. But it's veteran-owned, veteran-ran group, so really appreciate their sponsorship.
Yep, Global Canine Protection Group.
That's it.
Opelika.
Yeah, Auburn Opelika.
Yep. Opelika. Just got a couple more minutes left to go in the program. Just got spring games wrapped up. Not a big shock. I think Auburn ended up, I think Montgomery Advertiser announced around 30,000.
Yeah.
Tuscaloosa News, I think, said anywhere between 10 and 15.
Yeah.
Quite a departure of what we've seen in the past, Coach. Any takeaways at all from what you saw, what you heard, people you talked to from Alabama and Auburn's spring camps?
I think it was just what we expected there. Everybody's protecting themselves as best they can. And it's once again, it's just the world we're in. And it's what I would do. I did that in 14. And we got a rain out, but I was sure happy. And as I found out Troy was going to be at practice and we opened up with them. So, but now they're trying to get your players. So you got to be careful. You got to be smart. And, of course, you're trying to avoid injuries.
Yeah. So it's interesting having spring kind of conclude the way it did.
Yeah.
It was kind of a
anticlimactic.
Like you guys used to thud up, right, at practice.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of the way that this spring practice for Alabama and Auburn, it was kind of a thud.
It really was. Yeah. Thud, dud, whatever you want to call it.
But I'm sure if you're Hugh Freeze or Kalen DeBoer, you're like, hey, no major issues. It's just
I talked to Coach Vincent. He was like, we got out, he had an injury early, but he went 14 days. And he's like, thank God. I said, right. You're just, thank God we got something
Did they
done.
have a traditional game?
No, at a
kind of a scrimmage type.
And not even really, more of a scale back. They really had their scrimmage really the week before that.
Oh, did they really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They just, you're almost getting to practice 11 and you're like, oh my gosh, we've gotten after it. We've been physical and we don't need anybody hurt.
Yeah. So. One of it's our title sponsor, Jimmy Lee, and the great people at Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper. They bring us this show each and every week, and can't say enough about Jimmy Lee.
No, our guys at Buffalo Rock, Matthew Dent also, and appreciate those guys, and obviously Dr. Pepper, especially, college football, but sponsoring us and in Buffalo Rock, what they do in our community and throughout.
You enjoy being a grandfather right now at the ballpark?
I am.
Hanging out?
Trustful.
That's right.
Your neck of the woods.
Yep.
Very infamous there is
that is the operable word, infamous.
No,
yes, very much so. I keep missing you. Like I walk into the ballpark the other night and they say, hey, Coach Clark's here. Oh, you mean the guy from the Coach Bill Clark show?
Yeah.
Is that who you're
that's
talking
him.
about?
That's what they said.
He's over there watching. And then I go try to find you and you're gone. It's like you're helicopter grandfather.
Multiple fields.
Like you just come in and
we're all over the place.
Yeah. Well, hopefully
those turf fields, no rainouts. So that's.
Yeah, but it was cold and rainy the other night, and I was like, man.
Yeah, it was tough.
I was kind of wishing the good old days.
It was a football game.
I could have been at home.
Yeah, it would have been a rain out
instead of sitting there calling baseball games. So you never know when you're going to run into Coach Bill Clark at a ballpark near you. All-Stars right around the corner.
You never know. Coach safely, by the way.
That's right.
Trustful does it.
That's right.
Everybody needs to do it.
Be a part of it. How's my friend Jack Crow doing?
Jack's doing well.
Is he good?
He's doing well. Yep. Coach safely. It's the law.
Absolutely. For all of us here on the Coach Bill Clark Show, we appreciate you tuning us in each and every week on the program. For Molly Robinson, I'm Pat Smith. For Coach Bill Clark, we'll see you next week right here on the Bill Clark Show, presented by Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.